All right. So, again, thank you, Amy and Charles, for being here for our fellowships panel. So, we were going to have Courtney with us too, but she had a meeting come up. And yeah, we'll have you guys introduce yourselves. Amy, if you want to go ahead and say again, your name, organization, your current position, and then I'll have Charles do the same. And then I encourage the students to bring questions for you. And I have some questions I know I shared with you guys ahead of time as well, so we can do that. So, Amy, I'll kick it off to you.
Hi everyone, I am Amy Den. I currently work for the Office of the Attorney General. I'm a policy analyst in their legislative shop. I attended SUNY Geneseo undergrad and then UAlbany for my MPA, where I got my start doing a fellowship and then an internship. It's really nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Amy. Charles, I'll have you come up.
Yep. Hey, everybody. My name is Charles Heiler. Am I supposed to answer specific prompts for this or just like a general?
However you want to
Sure,
introduce yourself.
sure.
We'll do the more specific questions after.
All right. So I am a UAlbany grad. I went to Rockefeller College to get my MIA, Masters of International Affairs. While I was there, I got an Empire State Fellowship, which is a fellowship designed to get mid-career professionals into state service. Talk a lot about that a little bit later on. But right now I work at Empire State Development, the state's economic development agency, working in the Governor's Office of Semiconductor Expansion Management and Integration, working on the Micron project. How many of you guys have heard of the Micron project? All right, this is good because I'm in strategic communications, so it's my fault that you guys don't know about this. So the Micron project, there's a company called Micron. They make semiconductors, they make memory chips. Do you guys know what a semiconductor? That's okay. Most people don't either. Semiconductors are arguably the most important thing to the 21st century global economy. There's like the entire global economy is downstream of them. They're in computers, your phones, AI data centers, your car, literally everything. This company, Micron, is trying to spend $100 billion to build the largest semiconductor manufacturing facilities in US history outside of Syracuse in central New York. If it works, it's 50,000 new jobs. It's 87,000 people to a region that hasn't seen growth in 70 years, completely changing the economic trajectory of the region and potentially the entire state. That's where I was placed as a fellow, which was intimidating. But I'm more than happy to talk to you guys about that a little bit later on. So that's my spiel.
Great. Thank you, Charles. Appreciate it. So now I'm just realizing that they cannot see Amy. So this was our issue, of course, because there's always got to be one issue. But yeah, so I'll figure that out in a second. But we will hear Amy in the meantime. So yeah, so we will start with first student questions for Amy and Charles. And I can get us started and we can keep going as well. I mean, the whole focus will be, again, fellowships and how your fellowships have prepared you. And again, I know we talked about some more specific questions. So like I said, I can start with just how has your fellowship impacted your current role? So I know that's a big question, but I'll have you start with that, Charles.
Sure. So the only reason why I'm in my current role is because of the fellowship that I got. So like I said, the Empire State Fellowship is designed to get mid-career professionals into state service. The average age of a person entering state service, taking their civil service exam, is 18 years old. That was a long time ago for me. So, I have a career from like 15 years working in film and television, doing marketing and communications. And the goal of this program is to get somebody like me to consider, moving into state service. And that's what I wanted to do when I got my international affairs degree at UAlbany. And so that's what enabled me to do that. When you get that fellowship, you are also placed into an agency working at a high level on an issue that is of some interest to you. So throughout the process of getting the fellowship, the people who are on the selection committee, they learn more about you, about your qualifications, about your policy interests, and they try to match you as best as possible. And so I wound up getting matched on this team just based on that. So it's kind of an extraordinary bit of luck. I love what I do now, and I wouldn't be in that position had I not, looked into that fellowship.
Thank you, Charles. So Thankfully, I just got it figured out. So now they can see you, Amy, and I am going to spotlight you if that is okay. So we can see you. Yeah, so the same question I will ask to you, Amy, is how your fellowship, actually, I'll have Halima go after Amy, you answer the question about how your fellowship has impacted your current role and career path.
So when I applied for my fellowship, I wasn't sure I wanted to be in policy and I wasn't really sure the ins and outs. And so it actually was the first policy position I had. I was a fellow at the New York State Assembly in their grad scholars program. And so I was matched with an assembly member. I worked for Assembly Member Paulin, who really was inspiring me to write memos and work on policy that I was interested in, that she was also interested in and pushing. And so that's kind of where I found a love for policy. And it pushed me, when the fellowship ended, it pushed me into my job with other legislators and then central staff, and then now the position I have now.
Thank you, Amy. So the next question is, and I think this is for you, Charles. I think. Halima, did you mean for, now I have to remember as I was, were you at the attorney? This is for you, right?
Oh,
This
it's gotta be for Amy, right?
Oh, okay. Did you?
I
So yeah,
I got my job.
You can
I
see.
got my job. Yeah, I can see Halima's.
Sorry, my bad. I'm clearly kind of out of it today. I apologize.
So I got my start at the Attorney General's office because I had been working in Assembly Ways and Means for a few years, and it's a great job, but the hours are grueling. During budget season, I was essentially living in the Capitol, and I needed a little bit of a change. And I was, just scrolling through different offices that might be of interest that did policy work. And the Attorney General's office has a whole section of non-attorney positions, which range from fellowships for undergrad and graduate to policy analyst and support roles. And they had this open at the time, and I just applied. It was kind of a long shot, but I was very lucky, and I've been there for almost 4 years now.
Thank you, Amy. So, and then from Mari, what do you think makes an attractive candidate for a fellowship? That's a great question.
So I'm happy to start with this. I think it really depends on the fellowship that you're looking into. When you're looking at fellowships, you should be looking into programs that can take you to where you want to go. And even if it's just a general direction of where you want to go. How many of you guys are actually interested in state service, working for the state after you graduate? All right, so we got a couple. Anybody government work in general? Like federal, state, local, anything like that? And so, you want to look into fellowships that, can kind of get you there, right? But then really think about, what are your interests, and then how can you really kind of express that to the fellowship committee? So if you've done activities in the past that have indicated that you're interested in that, student government, any sort of kind of local volunteerism or working on a campaign, that's really helpful. And then, of course, I think something that was really helpful for me actually was the connections that I made with professors at Rockefeller College when I was working at when I was studying at UAlbany. Their reference letters, they meant a lot, and they did a lot for me in that. So, think of kind of personal points of contact that you can leverage to make yourself a more attractive candidate.
Great. And could you talk, I know this is a side question,
Sure.
but could you talk more about how Rockefeller, thank you, about how Rockefeller has kind of helped shape your career path and just overall networking and everything?
Sure. So in state government, everybody at Rockefeller College, it seems like they call them the rock mob. It's there's just this Rockefeller graduates at every level of state government. Some of them have been there so long ago that it was a different name at the time, Teachers College or whatever. But you kind of you're getting that network just by being at UAlbany, because this is the university in the area, and obviously a lot of talent goes from there. The career office is super helpful, and they really have a good understanding, especially at the state level, of how employment works here and where you can make connections. Um, I will say that, I got the Empire State Fellows, but I was originally nominated by Rockefeller College for the Excelsior Fellowship, which I think might be of more interest to you guys, because that's for people who are just coming out of school, right? I think you need to have a graduate degree for that. Is that?
You do.
Yes, yeah. But, for people who are on like those advanced programs, like, they come right out, and you get nominated by the school for that. And so you can't just come in off the street and apply, or fill out a form and submit an application. Um, and that actually, it was the same selection committee for Empire and Excelsior Fellowship. And it was during the interview process that the committee was like, we'd be way more qualified for this other fellowship. So they actually kind of helped guide me there. But that my foot in the door was really through a recommendation from Rockefeller College.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Amy, thoughts on, what makes a attractive candidate for, let's see, for a fellowship?
So I think this really highlighting, as Charles mentioned, any skills you have. I think UAlbany, both undergrad and then graduate, gives you really good transferable writing and public speaking skills. I came into the master's program at UAlbany with a history degree, so I was kind of doing a 180. I did realize pretty quick I didn't want to be a professor. No offense, no offense, Christina. It just I wasn't good.
But thank you.
I wasn't good. I wasn't good at the teaching aspect of kind of what was needed, and I had a different set of skills. And so when I came to Rockefeller, they really were able to help me hone in on both public speaking and memo writing. And so I think anytime you can highlight the skills in your in your cover letters or in your interviews, that's a really big thing. And then also, as Charles mentioned, networking. I came into the MPA program and I had no idea about all the internships and fellowships that there were. My first internship was at the Division of Criminal Justice Services, and it was great, but it just wasn't something I was ultimately interested in. And I didn't even know that there was an assembly fellowship until some of my peers and my professors mentioned it. And so using your fellow students and your teachers as a resource is really big.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. Other questions from the students? Like I said, I do have plenty of other questions, but you guys don't want to hear me talk anymore.
I have a question.
Yeah. Hang on 1 second. Yeah, Akiria, go ahead.
I was wondering, any advice for people who are not currently deciding to pursue a master's degree on their search for fellowships or short-term employment just to get more experience before they want to, I guess, look for their career or where they want to work for a long period of time?
Maybe you got anything for that? Because mine's a little more master's focused, but
I do. So I didn't go to grad school right away. I actually took a couple years and taught. And so I think just looking, because there are a lot of places that you don't need a master's for a fellowship or an internship. Like our office has a lot of undergraduate internships, and I know a lot of state offices also have a lot of undergraduate. But what I did was, right out of undergrad, I kind of just Googled places that I thought I might want to work at and look at their mission and just find fellowships from there. And also use your UAlbany professors as a reference, because they'll have a lot of knowledge about internships that you wouldn't need a master's degree for. I think a master's degree is great, and I am very glad I got my master's, but there are a ton of work opportunities for undergrad students to figure out what you want to do as well.
Yeah, I will say, obviously the resources that you have at UAlbany like really do exist to kind of help connect you to the experience that you want to have, and the connections that you need as an undergrad. I also didn't go to grad school for a really long time. Like I took like over a decade off before going back to school. So, it's not something that you have to jump into right away for a fellowship. I will say that before I was an Empire State Fellow, I actually did something called a Boren Fellowship, which is kind of like the Defense Department's equivalent of Fulbright Scholarship or Fulbright Fellowship. Um, Fulbright and Boren are both programs where you don't have you can be an undergrad, you can still be in school, or you can be right out of school. And that program is the Boren program that I was in specifically was to learn a foreign language that is supposed to be like essential for national defense. I don't know what that really means anymore, but I decided to learn Turkish. So I did that like literally right before I got this. And, I was able to actually kind of parlay some of that experience into the application process. It was interesting that I knew how to speak Turkish, even though I don't have to use that in my day-to-day job. But just that I had that experience was useful for a future employer to look at and say, like, that's kind of an interesting thing to speak to me about. So there are lots of other programs out there, and again, I definitely encourage you to reach out to the resources you have at UAlbany to kind of help guide you in that process.
We actually had on March 9th, we had speakers who spoke about federal grants like Boren and Fulbright.
Yes.
So I promise I didn't make you say that.
Oh, all right.
So but that's great.
It's, especially if you're more interested in like international things. I mean, there are still a lot of programs out there that are specifically designed for that. Fulbright is really great. There's a lot of flexibility. You can go to many different countries. You get like a stipend. They'll take care of, your living accommodations while you're there. And so then when you come back, you have to find a job. So it is like a short-term thing, but that's always an option too.
Great.
Cool. I think we have another question here.
So Shoffin says, I'm interning at the assembly right now, and I was interested in transitioning into something private like lobbying. Do you think it might be helpful to stay in the environment to make more connections through fellowships or other opportunities? So, Shoffin, what do you mean exactly by environment? Oh, my bad. Government. Thank you. Okay, so that makes sense.
I can start. So I think that it's kind of what you want to do. So I think there are definitely benefits to trying to get like a fellowship in the assembly or senate after interning and or working for as either an assembly or senator and or central staff on either side, because I think the reputation of working in this assembly or senate gives you a credibility, specifically because it is very grueling. When I was applying for jobs after interning with Amy, people definitely were like, she must have worked you to the bone. Like she has a lot of bills and she works really hard. And so I think it's a benefit of staying there is definitely like it's kind of a well-known environment and it does and can open more jobs. But I think it can also work the other way around. So if you were looking for a job in lobbying, you're going to be essentially lobbying the members, and so you can make a lot of the same connections because you'd be doing a lot of meetings with their staff. But the environments are very different, just because like something like lobbying is private, and so kind of takes you out of the world of like public service and into like you're more at the whim of like what exactly your employer is looking for. You know, when you're lobbying, you're not always choosing the things that you might be meeting about. So you have to be very willing to maybe take views that you don't personally agree with. Whereas if you're working in the assembly or Senate, you're likely choosing to work for a member or an assembly member or senator or central staff that you might agree with more of the ideas. So I think it's more of like a preference on what what experience you want to have.
That was a very diplomatic answer. Yeah. I will say, and not to, because I've never been a lobbyist, but when we encounter lobbyists, especially not from lobbying firms necessarily, but from like government affairs folks at companies, it's oftentimes all about the connections that those people have that get them those jobs to begin with. And so, if you work in government for a while, you have an understanding of how different agencies work, how the Senate, the Assembly works, and you have connections within there that you can then draw from that makes you a more valuable candidate. And that's an area where, an internship or a fellowship could potentially help you out. Very true. Yes, there are lobbying bans. And again, I haven't had to navigate this because I've never been a lobbyist, but it's a good point. Yeah.
Great. So
Yeah, the ban is I think 3 years, and you wouldn't be able to lobby. You would have to be behind the scenes, so it'd essentially like be desk work. Um, I mean, there's like some workarounds, like if you worked for the ledge, you can still lobby like the exec agencies, but most of the lobbying is for the elected, like for the legislature.
Yeah. Like, we work with a lot of different guys. So at the State's Economic Development Agency, we work with a lot of companies and, they're government affairs folks. They're almost all, former staffers. They worked in the Assembly, they worked in the Senate, whether it was a long time ago or not, one thing or another, but it's a small network. So again, building up that network is kind of like a long-term play regardless. Just always want to be kind of thinking about that, even if you're not just, creating connections just to kind of jump to the next point. It's an iterative process. You're always kind of building off of the network that you have.
we'll talk about in class later.
Okay.
LinkedIn.
Oh yeah.
So
God, I hate LinkedIn. You got to do it. It's the worst.
So, actually, are there certain master's degrees that would benefit trying for a fellowship?
This is like such a commercial for you, Albany, right? Like, yeah, Rockefeller College is really good. You guys should go to Rockefeller College, stay at U Albany, keep paying those tuition fees. Again, especially if you're interested in working in state government, like there really is almost no better place to be. So many people that I work with either went to U Albany or they went to Syracuse, and the people who went to Syracuse are in a lot more debt. So, do with that information what you will.
Well, that's a very good point. So, yeah, Amy, thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, Ashley, are you asking about like what specific master's degrees or just in general? Like,
Yeah, what specific master's degrees? Like I'm trying for my MPA. I don't know, like you said that you did your MPA. Did that benefit you in any way for your fellowship or no?
yeah, so I think that MPA definitely helped me. I would not say that I couldn't get to where I was with my history degree, because took a lot of skills from that, but I think the master's program, like the MPA, gave me something extra, specifically because at Rockefeller it was very focused on public speaking, memo writing, and like the things that you do in public service, which was huge, and you take like the MPA program has the accounting classes and the Excel classes, and it's definitely things that I still use in my job to this day. I think the biggest thing is the memo writing. So I do think it did give me a leg up.
Okay, thank you.
And the connections.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's also, I just have a quick question because I know this is one I feel like I have a hard time answering depending on the fellowship, the specific program. From both of your experiences, how would you say your fellowships differed from other like internships you've had?
I was gonna say I got paid. That helped. So, so the Empire State Fellows, like Excelsior Fellowship Program, it's a full-time job and you're a salaried employee. So with benefits and everything, that's good. You need to get paid to live and you should get paid for your work. But yeah, I think that it's a little weird too because when you're an Excelsior fellow or when you're an Empire fellow, you're just kind of dropped into an agency and people don't know who the hell you are and they don't really know what you do or what you bring. It's not like you have like a job description that you kind of come into like you would like a normal job. So in some ways you are kind of like an intern and you have to kind of strike this balance of keeping it really humble because you are brand new to state service as a fellow. But by the same token, you are coming with like supposedly a wealth of experience and knowledge, and you want to be able to apply that and then use that to kind of define what your role is going to be and not have it be defined for you. So you're not getting coffee for somebody or making copies. You're, trying to do what you want to do, what your goals are. And for me, I brought my skills and experience for marketing and communications, and I was able to just kind of parlay that into a strategic communications role in the office. So I'd say that that's kind of the big difference is you have like a little bit more breathing room to define what that role is, and again, it is like a full-time job. So good.
My follow-up question for you, Charles, is like, and you kind of started talking about it, like, how would you, like, what advice would you give for students, like, say they get accepted to a fellowship, just any fellowship, how to prepare going into that?
You have to advocate for yourself, and in order to advocate for yourself, you have to kind of know what you want. And that's easier said than done. When I first started, you realize you're working with people who have been working on the same project that you've been working on, the same area, but they've been doing it for like 25 years, and you're just coming in, and they don't know anything about you. And so the fellowship affords you the opportunity to kind of be in learning mode where you're not coming in and kind of responsible for something right off the bat. So, you know, my fellowship was 2 years, and they said the first year you're really just kind of you're there to listen, you're there to learn, you're there to try to figure out, what meetings should you be a part of, what meetings should you really push yourself to be in, and then to use the connections that you're making to kind of define the role that you're going to be in, and it's fairly structured, like like for the Excelsior fellows, like you actually have classes biweekly, where they have different agencies that come in and talk to you about the way that government works, and so it's like an educational foundation as well. I think all fellowships are supposed to have that kind of educational component to it. But that is like an advantage too of coming into any complex system as a fellow, as opposed to just coming in with a regular job.
That's great. Thank you, Charles. Amy, thoughts on that? Like your differences from your fellowship difference from other internships or experiences that you've had?
Yeah, so when I interned at DCJS, I think it was very rigid. It was like I had like 3 set duties and I did those, and I had certain hours I punched in and out, and it was very much like this is to supplement your schooling, where I feel like with the fellowship it was more like this is to help you figure out if this is like a path you want to make a career. My my fellowship with the assembly, it was a bit different than Charles. Mine was just like a stipend, so I was not considered like a full-time employee, and I was just a it was like a year-long fellowship. It might be like session based now, but I did have to attend like a weekly fellowship class where I would, reflect on what was going on. But a lot of it was what your member wanted you to do. And so there was a lot more flexibility in my fellowship than I had in any internships to really learn what I liked to do. And it 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 was not easy. It was more or less a full-time job. I think I worked 36 hours and I did my MPA full-time as well. And so I think since then the Assembly Fellowship at least has upped their stipend, and the class structure on like the educational component is a little different than I did. But I think that you kind of get more breathing room in a fellowship to kind of mold into like what you want for a career.
That's a lot to manage during that time, Amy, that you mentioned, 36 hours and a full-time MPA. I don't know. I commend you for that. So other questions. Like I said, other questions from the students in the room or on Zoom. Let me just open the chat up here too. Okay, so we got that. Okay, so I'll ask my next question then. Let's see. So what made your application process like successful? Anything that you wish you could have done, you would have done differently? Any tips you have for that fellowship application? That's my main question for you both.
It's a tough one. I would say that I probably didn't need to go to Azerbaijan for 6 months and learn Turkish as a foreign fellow. So, it was good to like figure that out. But I went into my master's program with a different career track in mind. I had lived in Turkey for a bit. I spoke a little bit of Turkish, and so I knew that like I wanted to do something that was more international, and I wanted to leverage the experience that I had for a career. And I was basically thinking when I went into the program that I would come out and go to the U.S. State Department as a foreign service officer. And so it's just like the state government, it's very difficult to break into the federal government. It's easier to get in than it is to get promoted once you're inside of the system. So, Boren was an opportunity to kind of figure that out. And I probably still would have continued to pursue that. Very happy in this particular moment that that's not what I'm doing right now. But like having the flexibility of having like a fellowship to kind of figure that out and to figure out what you really want to do, I think is also, an underrated benefit. But, thinking a bit more about what my ultimate goal was going to be, I think would be my advice.
Sadly, I think we've kind of gone into this a little bit, but like if for people that might be considering fellowships or just other, like I said to you earlier, we have a lot of seniors too who are deciding on their next steps. Like, would you advise? Like, okay, there's a certain type of, like, I know sometimes students will ask, like, oh, would I be good for that type of opportunity? Do you think there's certain people that are like, I don't want to say good for fellowships, but like best suited? Or I guess generally, what are your thoughts on that?
You have to have a legitimate interest. Like, even if it's aspirational, I mean, you have to be able to demonstrate that like every fellowship exists to kind of have that has a goal, right? It's to either, get you to do a specific research project if you're like a Fulbright fellow, or, to get you into federal service if you're a Boren fellow, or state service as an Empire Excelsior fellow. And so you really have to communicate that not only do you have like the skills to step into that role in the future, but also that you like give a shit, right? That you care. And so that's really important. And, it can be difficult too, when you're applying for some of these, you know, I guess not predefined fellowships, like where you're going to get placed in an agency, to figure that out. So I think if you come in with like a policy area that you're particularly passionate about, or if there's a project that you're well particularly excited about, you want your application to really reflect that. So
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, Amy, any words of advice slash thoughts on, students who are considering fellowships and whether or not to consider a fellowship?
I think the biggest advice that I have to do before once you've applied for the fellowship is to make sure you're practice your interview skills. My fellowship was the first time I had done a panel interview, and there's 6 people interviewing me, and I walked out and I was like, damn, I don't think I was prepared, and I don't think I did very well. So I think just practicing if once you've applied, to ensure that you have the answers and you're communicating how you want to. But when you're thinking of applying, I think being really honest with yourself about what you're willing to do. I have a lot of friends that did fellowships in agencies, and they were very different than my fellowship, because my fellowship was my member calling me at 8 p.m. on a Friday night, and she's intense. So, I would pick up the phone, and that has kind of been my career since then. Policy is going to be sometimes it's not the 9 to 5. And so I think being really honest about what you're willing to do, and what you're willing to do as your job duties is a really big thing to consider when you're considering a fellowship.
I think that's to second that for sure. I mean, the Excelsior Fellow, or the Empire State Fellows. Oh, they really gotta rebrand these things to ease. But because of where you're placed in government, they tell you right off the bat, like this is not going to be a 9 to 5 job. So I try to keep a separation between work and not work, but always have my phone on me, and just expect emails on Sundays, because I know that's when my boss is going to be in the office. And so, I knew that going into it, that was the experience that I was going to have, and I was okay with that. Especially coming from the private sector, where that's often the case, that was okay. But you got to be honest with yourself and what you're really up for. Your fellowship really is kind of it can be like a proving ground for yourself and what you bring to the table. And so if you take on something that you're really not prepared to do, or that you don't want to do, that can be okay to figure that out during that fellowship. But, ideally you want to kind of know that going into it.
What you just mentioned, how did you separate and maintain work-life balance?
I have 2 separate phones.
Okay.
So yeah, I got the work phone, and Amy. It's really nice when you go on vacation, you just leave this at home. It's great, and then no one can reach you. But that's not really advisable. So they'll still find a way. But yeah, so my boss is very insistent that I'm in the office when he's in the office, which can be kind of a pain, because I live in Catskill. It's 30 minutes south of Albany. But by the same token, it's actually very nice to be able to drive into work, and then at the end of the day, leave and be more or less done for the day. And that's a nice professional experience. Same thing, you have to dress, at least business professional every day. And it's also nice, at the end of the day, I could just change into my regular clothes and just not be at work anymore. So, that's nice. That's not an experience everybody would have, but, I'd recommend the experience. And you've got another question.
Thank Thank you, Charles. So Karen said, how do you make sure personal boundaries are not crossed? So Karen, feel free to add on to that too. And feel free
Yeah,
to, yeah.
so definitely when you were talking right now about like you being able to like turn off your phone, like how do you not live with like the constant like I don't want to say like panic or like anxiety of like, oh, what if something is going on? Or like what if anybody needs me? Or like let's say in like situations where like I don't want to say like a boss could be like over demanding, like how do you separate like that? I guess like to furthermore like explain the question that Christina had asked.
Sure. Yeah. Amy, yeah, if you want to take this on first.
Yeah, so uh, in, in total honesty, this is something I really had to learn. So my fellowship kind of guarded me a little bit because at the end of the day, I was a student. And so there is an understanding, right, that school is my priority and this was not my career yet. Like it was a stepping stone to my career. Um, but I think when I transitioned into working for a different member, there was no I had no boundaries. Like I was pretty much at their beck and call. And then it was kind of the same way when I worked for central staff because that is the job. So certain jobs are very hard to do that in the sense that like when I worked for Ways and Means during budget season, it was 20 hours a day. Like I would sleep at the office. I would essentially just go home, shower, and come back. And it was like that until the budget passed. I had to be released every night. Like I couldn't leave until they said that it was okay for us all to leave. And like, quite frankly, at times I felt like I was a little bit of like an animal in a pen. And so I think one that it goes back to like the honesty. You have to be really honest if you're willing to do that because some jobs didn't have the ability to have those personal boundaries not crossed all the time. And that was just like part of the job. Never in an inappropriate way. It was just demanding. Like you had to keep your phone on, you had to do that. In my current role, the way I do that is kind of like setting boundaries up front. You know, I like Charles also have two different phones. They always expect my work phone to be on. But if I'm taking vacation or going to a doctor's or have something personal, I'm just like pretty upfront about, hey, you know, I'm taking this time off. I'm not gonna have my phone. Like, you know, if it's an emergency, like maybe I will have access to email and can check it. But I think a lot of times if you're in a position to just be upfront and be like, hey, I have this boundary. I'm gonna take time and I'm not gonna be anywhere. Typically, like people that you work with will help find like a workaround to try not to disturb you. But with some jobs, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, I think I think Amy made a great point. Like defining those boundaries is really key. Like, when you're going to go on vacation, like, make sure that your time off is like there on the calendar, approved, that your team knows about it, and that you have a plan for somebody to cover for you if, you do get an inquiry that maybe isn't an emergency necessarily, but like demands a quick response, that there's somebody else within your organization that they can reach out to. But I will say that like government service in general, it can be very boring. Um, it oftentimes is, but almost always, like the things that you do and the things that you're working on, like really affect people, where they can. And so, you do kind of have to step up. You do have to, when called upon, to kind of go above and beyond like the average 9 to 5. And that's to me, like that's something that I was looking for in the role in the job. That's not everybody's experience at every agency and in every fellowship. But just, I think something that's really important to keep in mind. The work that you do really does matter. So sometimes you gotta be there for it, even when it's kind of annoying. but set your boundaries. It's got to be within reason.
Also, one last thing I want to kind of caveat with all of this is that it also really depends on the position, right? Like I don't have this, like I have a lot more flexibility than my bosses and people that are very high up in my agency that like have to have their phone. So I think like you also have to think of like what role you want. I work a lot of hours outside the 9 to 5, but I'm also probably not going to be the person that they call like in the dead of night for an emergency, or at least like I hope it's not me because that might mean everybody else is like dead. But it also is like very dependent on the role. So like thinking about what role you want and how you want to like climb the ladder is also really important.
Thank you. So, other questions from students about fellowships and Amy and Charles's fellowships in particular? I think before we wrap up, if you could both just talk a little bit more about like what you did on a day-to-day basis at your fellowship. From what I know they were a bit ago in time, but from what you can recall, just to give the students an idea of like, okay, would this be something I'd be interested in?
Amy, I don't know if you want to start with that.
Yeah, for my legislative fellowship, it was the bulk of it was during the legislative session. And so I don't know how familiar everyone is with what goes on, but it was a lot of like memo writing for sponsors memo. So anytime a member files a bill, you have to essentially do a sponsors memo, which is like a summary of changes and a justification for said bill. And so it was like a lot of those, a lot of research on like what laws currently existed, what laws needed to be updated, and like what laws weren't on the books and should be. A lot of meeting with like lobbyists and advocacy groups, and a lot of budget sign-on letters, which is essentially like just member priorities. So it was very nitty-gritty in the day-to-day budget and policy work that like contributes to New York's like current laws.
So the day-to-day at my fellowship again kind of changed over the course of the 2 years. And I wound up doing a year and a half before I transitioned to my current role in the office. But that first year is really like it's designed for you to kind of not know what is going on, and to kind of figure out how your role is going to be defined within the agency. So like, for a lot of fellows that did the program with me, like that was not the best experience for them, to be honest. Just, especially like a program that's trying to bring mid-career professionals into state service to just like kind of have nothing to do. Isn't the best. But the fellowship affords you the opportunity to be patient, to learn, to make the connections, and to define the role that you want to have. So what I wound up doing was, I kind of just tried to get into as many meetings as possible, especially any meeting that was kind of public facing, or working on attracting the semiconductor industry here. So like anything that was going to be industry facing, so that we could think about communications, not just from a traditional public affairs perspective, where you're just communicating to constituents and legislators, but really being able to communicate about New York State to the industry to encourage investment here. And eventually, my boss was given an opportunity to give a keynote address at a big conference in San Francisco, SemiCon West. Took the stage with Al Gore, which is pretty exciting. And I got to write the speech for him, coach him through it, and then come up with like the visuals that went on behind him. And it was a big success. And so, from there, I was able to kind of, get into a lot more speech writing, thinking about building a communication strategy again that can kind of speak to industry as well as to the general public, even if apparently nobody knows about the Micron project. It's fine. But yeah, so that was like it's hard to say like what the day to day is. I think it's definitely not as defined because it's not like the pressure cooker that like the Senate or the Assembly would be in, especially in session. But that to me that was like a really wonderful thing to be introduced to state government, this incredibly complex, again, often very boring structure that can be very difficult to kind of wrap your arms around, and to be like you have basically a year to kind of figure out this system and your role within it. And that's something that a fellowship could afford that, again, like had I just taken like the civil service exam and just entered civil service that way, wouldn't have been afforded. So,
Yeah.
so,
Thank,
yeah.
thank Charles. Other?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Amy.
yeah, can I just say something? Because I was just thinking about something based on a message too. I think looking at fellowships, I just want to like really highlight this too. Looking at fellowships and doing a fellowship is also like a really good way to figure out like if grad school or if law school or if any of those are what you want to do, because I always wanted to go to law school. That was like what I was going to do. And then through my fellowship and through what essentially was the MPA program, I realized, as great as law school is, I didn't need a law degree for like a lot of government and nonprofit jobs. Like you can do a lot of policy work and a lot of like making a difference in people's lives without having a law degree. And so a fellowship is a really good like way to figure out like what direction you want to go if you ultimately want to do any of those things, because you know, being honest, law school is really expensive. And so the fellowship was a really good way to like kind of test out what skills I would need for my like future career as well.
We have actually a lot of students like in our class are interested in law school or pursuing law school adjacent opportunities. So this is all helpful too. So
God bless, guys. Good luck.
but no, thank you. And thank you both so much. I just want to give, some time for final student questions and then also, any final thoughts you both have. So I'll give a minute for any student questions in the class for Amy and Charles before we end for today. Yeah, Sean.
Your question, Micron stuff.
Sure.
The projected time, like all the job.
So it's a 16-year construction process. It's the single biggest private investment in state history. So, it's going to take some time. It's going to be they call them fabs, semiconductor factories. And their complex is going to have 4. So hopefully by 2030. Hopefully we can move that timeline up a little bit, but it'll take some time for sure. But we know that the population increase and especially those early construction jobs are really going to start to impact the region in the next like 5 years.
Right. Other questions from Zoom or in person? All right. Any final thoughts, Charles, that you have?
Is anyone thinking about doing fellowship? You got some? Do you have any fellowships in mind or?
I've been
Oh, wait.
I've thought about doing it. I've thought about doing some like in New York City, like the Urban Fellows, the Govern for America. I know there's one at some agencies too. So yeah, I'm just waiting for responses.
Oh, you've already applied.
Yeah,
Good luck.
thank you.
Thanks, Akaria. Yep, that's Center for Women in Government. Yeah, that's definitely very much associated with Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a great one, Lex. Thank you.
The girl that I worked with at Amy Pollan's office did the women in government and she really enjoyed it. So definitely like sorry to the men, but any women that are thinking
We're doing fine.
about that. It's I've heard really good things, and she still works in the office to this day. So it set her up on a really good
Now she's my
path.
boss. Thanks, Troy.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna shout out Troy because he works with Shelby, which is who I'm talking about. So I'm sure she would be happy to also answer questions if anyone. I can ask her if anyone has questions about that internship fellowship specifically.
That would be great. Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. Yeah, and then I think Quinn said, let's see. Quinn said I would like to do the Attorney General's fellowship, but need to be in law school first. So that's how that works?
So I think that there is yes, the fellowship, but there's a lot of like internships for where you don't have to be in law school. So we have like a lot of students who are not in law school that do an internship instead of a fellowship. And to be honest, our office is pretty lax, so it almost operates as a fellowship in the way that like you can stay there for a longer time than just a semester internship. So Quinn, I don't know when the periods are, to be honest. Probably something I should have looked at before I did the panel, but definitely look into the internships as well as the fellowship, because they won't require law school and are also a really good starting point.
Yeah, those are ones we post through our student newsletter too. Just like a lot of the ones we get from the Attorney General's office. So that's
I do. I have a fellow. I have a fellow actually. I take on a fellow every year for session, and so that will be usually I post it in August, so you can look out for that too, because we don't require a law school for our policy.
That's great.
One, so.
And guys, yeah, keep this in mind, guys. This is great. Thank you, Amy. All right. Any other thoughts? And yeah, thank you again for just, making the students aware of those opportunities too. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I guess we will wrap up from there.
Cool.
Anything else, Charles? Or
I'm
all
good. Yeah.
All right.
Thanks
Well,
for having us.
thank you guys for being here, Amy and Charles. We really appreciate it. And I will definitely follow up with you both about if students have questions,
Sure.
referring them to you if you're okay with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys have any questions about Excelsior Empire or Boren Fellowships, I'm a resource for it. So
thank you, Charles. Appreciate
the
it.
Micron project. Happy to talk about it all day long.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Amy, and thank you so much, Charles. So we will stop the recording here and hang on one second.